The old stagecoach rolled into Copper Creek just as the sun started to set behind the dusty hills. The wheels made a grinding sound against the dirt road, and the horses snorted and shook their heads, tired from the long journey across Texas. Inside the coach, a young woman clutched a worn leather bag tightly in her hands. Her name was Lucy, and she had been traveling for 3 weeks to reach this small town. Lucy stepped down from the coach carefully, her long blue dress getting caught on the step for a moment. She looked around the main street of Copper Creek and saw wooden buildings on both sides, most of them needing fresh paint. There was a general store, a saloon with loud voices coming from inside, and what looked like a small church at the end of the street. The air smelled like dust, horses, and something cooking from the nearby restaurant. A few people stopped what they were doing to stare at her. In a town this small, everyone knew everyone else, so a stranger always caught attention. Lucy kept her head up and walked with steady steps, even though she felt nervous inside. She had learned long ago that showing fear only made things worse. The stagecoach driver threw down a small trunk from the top of the coach. "This is all your belongings, miss?" he asked, wiping sweat from his forehead. "Yes, that's everything," Lucy replied softly. She didn't have much, but what she had was enough to start over. That's all she wanted now, a chance to start fresh. Where nobody knew her story, an older woman with gray hair came out of the general store. "You must be the lady who sent the letter about renting the old schoolhouse," she said with a friendly smile. "I'm Mrs. Chun. My husband owns the store," Lucy nodded. "Yes, that's me. Thank you for holding it for me." "Oh, don't mention it, dear. That building has been empty for 2 years now, ever since the town built the new school closer to the center. You sure you want to live way out there? It's pretty lonely." "I like quiet places," Lucy said. It wasn't entirely true, but she needed somewhere away from curious eyes and constant questions. Mrs. Chun studied her face for a moment. "Well, you look like you can take care of yourself. The keys are inside. Come by tomorrow and we'll get you settled with supplies." As they talked, Lucy noticed a man sitting on the porch of the saloon. He was tall with dark hair under a worn cowboy hat, and he seemed to be watching their conversation. When their eyes met for a second, he touched the brim of his hat politely but didn't come over. Something about him seemed different from the other men she could see around town. He looked more careful, more aware of everything happening around him. Mrs. Chun followed her gaze. "That's Tom Reeves. He works as foreman on the biggest ranch around here. Good man, keeps to himself mostly. Lost his wife a few years back." Lucy felt a pang of sympathy but didn't ask more questions. She had her own painful past to deal with. The sound of loud laughter came from inside the saloon, followed by a group of young men stumbling out onto the porch. One of them, wearing fancy clothes that looked out of place in this dusty town, noticed Lucy immediately. Well, he said loudly, his words slurring slightly. "Looks like Copper Creek just got a lot more interesting." He walked toward Lucy. With unsteady steps, his friends following behind him. Mrs. Chun stepped closer to Lucy. "That's Billy Morrison. His father owns the bank. He thinks that gives him the right to bother anyone he wants." Billy reached them and looked Lucy up and down in a way that made her skin crawl. "Hello there, beautiful. I'm Billy Morrison. My family practically owns this town. Maybe I could show you around, help you get comfortable." "No, thank you," Lucy said firmly but politely. She had learned that being too rude to powerful men could cause problems. Billy's friends laughed. One of them said, "Come on, Billy. She's probably just another runaway with secrets to hide. Why else would a city girl come to a place like this?" The comment hit too close to home, and Lucy felt her face get hot. Billy stepped even closer, and she could smell whiskey on his breath. "Now don't be unfriendly," Billy said, reaching out, as if to touch her arm. "I'm just being neighborly." Before his hand could reach her, another hand caught his wrist. Tom had crossed the street without making a sound. "The lady said no, Billy." Tom's voice was calm, but there was something dangerous underneath it. "Maybe you should head home and sleep off that whiskey." Billy pulled his hand back and glared at Tom. "This isn't your business, Reeves. When someone bothers people in my town, it becomes my business. Tom didn't raise his voice, but somehow he seemed bigger and more threatening than before. For a moment, the two men stared at each other. Billy's friends shifted nervously behind him. Finally, Billy forced a laugh. That didn't sound natural. Whatever, come on, boys, let's find some real entertainment. He turned to Lucy one more time. When you get tired of this place, you know where to find me. After they left, Mrs. Chun shook her head. That boy is going to cause real trouble. Someday, his father spoils him rotten. Tom tipped his hat to Lucy. Sorry you had to deal with that on your first day here. Most folks in Copper Creek are decent people. Thank you for stepping in, Lucy said. She studied his face, trying to understand why he had helped her. In her experience, men usually wanted something in return for their help. No need to thank. Me, just doing what anyone should do. Tom paused for a moment, then added, The old schoolhouse is about a mile down the road that way. If you need anything fixed or if anyone bothers you again, my ranch is just past the big oak tree. Names. Tom Reeves. I'm Lucy, she replied, not giving a last name. She wasn't ready for that yet. Tom nodded as if he understood. Well, Lucy, welcome to Copper Creek. I hope you find what you're looking for here. As Tom walked back toward his horse, Lucy wondered what he meant by that. Could he somehow tell that she was running from something? Or was she just being paranoid? After so many months of looking over her shoulder, Mrs. Chun helped her load her trunk onto a small cart. Tom's a good judge of character, she said as they walked toward the old schoolhouse. If he's willing to help you, that means he sees something good in you. The schoolhouse sat on a small hill overlooking the town. It was bigger than Lucy had expected, with large windows and a stone chimney. Inside, there was one big room that must have held classes, and a smaller room in the back that would work as a bedroom. The wooden floors creaked under their feet, but everything seemed solid. The well out back still works, Mrs. Chun explained. And there's a root cellar for keeping food cool. Not fancy, but it's clean and safe. Lucy set down her bag and looked. Around, for the first time in months, she felt like she could breathe properly. It's perfect, she said, and meant it after Mrs. Chun left. Lucy sat on the front steps and watched the sun finish setting over Copper Creek. The town looked peaceful in the golden light, with smoke rising from chimneys and the sound of families calling children in for supper. She thought about Tom's kind eyes and Mrs. Chun's welcoming smile. Maybe, just maybe, she could build a real life here. But first, she had to make sure her past stayed buried. She couldn't let anyone discover who she really was or what she had done to escape. Some secrets were too dangerous to share, even in a place as quiet as Copper Creek. 2 weeks had passed since Lucy arrived in Copper Creek, and she was starting to feel more at home. The old schoolhouse had become her workshop and living space. She had set up a small business making and fixing clothes for the townspeople. Word spread quickly in a small town, and soon women were bringing her torn dresses, men's work shirts that needed mending, and requests for new clothes. Lucy discovered she had a real talent for sewing. Her fingers moved quickly and surely as she worked, creating beautiful stitches that were both strong and neat. She had learned these skills out of necessity in her old life, but now she could use them to build something good. The front room of the schoolhouse had become her shop. She arranged fabric samples on the old teacher's desk and hung finished dresses on wooden pegs along the walls. The afternoon light that came through the big windows was perfect for detailed work. Lucy often worked late into the evening, the sound of her sewing machine the only noise in the quiet building. She was working on a new dress for the doctor's wife when she heard the sound of hammering outside. Lucy looked out the window and saw Tom fixing the wooden fence that ran around her property. He had taken off his hat and jacket, and his shirt sleeves were rolled up as he worked. Lucy hadn't seen much of Tom since her first day, though she had noticed him riding past her place a few times. She watched him work for a moment, impressed by how quickly and skillfully he repaired the broken fence posts. When he finished, he gathered his tools and walked toward the house. Lucy met him at the front door. "You didn't need to fix my fence?" she said. "I could have hired someone." Tom wiped sweat from his forehead with the back of his hand. "It wasn't safe the way it was. A strong wind could have knocked it down completely." He paused and looked at her directly. Besides, I don't mind helping a neighbor. At least let me pay you for the wood and nails. No need. I had extra supplies at the ranch. Tom put his hat back on. How's the sewing business going? Better than I expected. People here seem to appreciate good work. Lucy gestured toward the shop. Would you like some coffee? It's the least I can do. Tom hesitated for a moment, then nodded. That would be nice. They sat on the front porch with their coffee, looking out over the town below. Tom asked about her work, and Lucy found herself talking more freely than she had with anyone in a long time. He seemed genuinely interested in hearing about the different techniques she used and the challenges of starting a business in a new place. You're from back east originally? Tom asked. Lucy felt her body tense up, but she tried to keep her voice normal. Yes, but I wanted to change. City life can be difficult. Tom nodded as if he understood. Sometimes a person needs to start fresh somewhere new. There was something in his tone that made Lucy wonder if he was speaking from experience. She wanted to ask more, but she knew that asking questions meant being willing to answer them too. Their conversation was interrupted by the sound of horses approaching fast. 3 men on horseback came riding hard toward the town, dust flying behind them. Even from a distance, Lucy could see they looked rough and dangerous. Tom stood up quickly, his whole body alert. Those men don't belong here, he said quietly. The riders stopped in front of the saloon and tied up their horses. Lucy could see guns hanging from their belts and rifles attached to their saddles. One of them was shouting something at the people on the street, but she couldn't make out the words from this distance. Cattle rustlers, Tom said grimly. We've been having problems with them for months. They steal cattle from the ranches and sell them in other towns. Lucy felt a familiar cold fear in her stomach. She had hoped to escape from violence and dangerous men, but it seemed like trouble could find you anywhere. Tom started to leave, then stopped and looked back at her. Lucy, do you know how to use a gun? The question surprised her. Why do you ask? These men are dangerous. If they cause trouble in town, people might need to defend themselves. Tom's face was serious. I'm not trying to scare you, but it's better to be prepared. Lucy thought about the small pistol hidden in her trunk, the one she had brought from her old life. She had hoped never to need it again. I can handle myself, she said quietly. Something in her voice made Tom look at her more carefully. Good, hopefully it won't come to that, but it's good to know. Tom rode toward town to help deal with the rustlers, and Lucy went back inside her shop. But she couldn't concentrate on her sewing. Instead, she found herself thinking about the gun in her trunk and remembering things she wanted to forget. An hour later, she heard more horses and shouting. Then there were 3 loud gunshots. Lucy's hands started shaking, and she had to put down her needle before she hurt herself. The sounds brought back memories of another night, in another place when gunshots had changed her life forever. She closed her eyes and tried to push the memories away, but they came flooding back anyway. The fear, the desperation, and finally the terrible moment when she had to choose between her safety and her conscience. When the noise outside finally stopped, Lucy made a decision. She went to her trunk and took out the small pistol, checking to make sure it was still loaded. Then she hid it in a drawer of her sewing table, where she could reach it quickly if needed. She had come to Copper Creek to escape violence, but she wouldn't be helpless if violence found her here. Later that evening, Tom came back to check on her. His clothes were dusty and there was a small cut on his hand, but he seemed unharmed. Everything all right? Lucy asked, trying to keep her voice steady. The rustlers moved on. They were just passing through, looking for information about cattle. Movements. Sheriff convinced them to keep riding. Tom sat down heavily in the chair on her porch. Sorry you had to see that on such a peaceful day. Lucy brought him a bowl of water and a clean cloth for his cut. As she cleaned the wound, she noticed how steady his hands were. This was a man who had dealt with danger before. Can I ask you something? Lucy said as she wrapped his hand. Sure. You don't seem surprised by trouble like this. Have you always lived the quiet ranch life? Tom was quiet for a long moment. No, he finally said. I had a different life before I came here. Sometimes the past follows you even when you try to leave it behind. Lucy understood exactly what he meant. Do you ever regret the choices you made back then? Some of them. But I learned that you can't change the past. You can only try to do better going forward. Tom looked at her with those kind, careful eyes. What about you? Any regrets about leaving your old life behind? Lucy thought about how to answer. I regret that I had to leave, but I don't regret the choice to start over. They sat in comfortable silence as the stars came out. Lucy realized that this was the first real conversation she had had with anyone in months. Tom didn't push for details or ask uncomfortable questions. He seemed to understand that some stories were too painful to tell. When Tom finally left, Lucy felt less alone than she had since arriving in Copper Creek. Maybe it was possible to build new relationships without revealing all the dark parts of your past. Maybe some people could accept you without knowing everything about where you came from. But as she locked her door and checked that her pistol was still in the drawer, Lucy knew she wasn't ready to trust completely. Not yet. The rustlers might be gone, but the memories they brought back reminded her that danger could appear at any time. She had to stay ready, stay careful, and keep her secrets safe. In this quiet town, surrounded by good people like Tom and Mrs. Chun, it was easy to start believing in second chances. But Lucy had learned the hard way that hope could be dangerous. The best she could do was take each day as it came and try to build something good while staying prepared for the worst. A month had passed since the trouble with the rustlers, and life in Copper Creek had settled back into its peaceful rhythm. Lucy's sewing business was doing so well that she could barely keep up with all the orders. She had made curtains for the doctor's office, a new dress for Mrs. Chun, and work shirts for half the ranch hands in the area. The townspeople had started to accept her as one of their own. They waved when they saw her walking to the general store, and the children stopped to watch when she hung colorful fabrics out to dry in the sunshine. Lucy was beginning to feel something she hadn't felt in years, like she belonged somewhere. Tom had become a regular visitor to her porch in the evenings. Sometimes he brought news from around the county. Sometimes he helped with small repairs around the schoolhouse, and sometimes they just sat and talked about ordinary things like the weather or the latest gossip from town. Lucy looked forward to these visits more than she wanted to admit. One sunny Tuesday morning, a traveling preacher arrived in Copper Creek. His name was Reverend Williams, and he announced that he would be holding special revival meetings for the next week. The whole town buzzed with excitement as people planned to attend the evening services in the church. Mrs. Chun stopped by Lucy's shop that afternoon to invite her personally. "You simply must come, dear," she said enthusiastically. Reverend Williams is known all across Texas for his powerful sermons. They say he can touch people's hearts and change their lives. Lucy felt a familiar tightness in her chest. "Thank you for thinking of me, but I'm not really the church-going type." "Oh, but these aren't regular church services. They're special meetings for the whole community." "Everyone will be there?" Mrs. Chun looked disappointed. "Are you sure you won't reconsider?" "I'm sure," Lucy said, trying to keep her voice light. "I have a lot of work to catch up on anyway." After Mrs. Chun left, Lucy sat at her sewing table with shaking hands. The truth was that churches made her feel trapped and judged. In her old life, she had been forced to sit through long sermons about sin and punishment while hiding bruises under long sleeves. The smell of candles and the sound of hymns brought back memories of praying desperately for help that never came. That evening, Lucy could hear singing coming from the church as the whole town gathered for the revival meeting. She tried to focus on her sewing, but her hands wouldn't stop trembling. Finally, she put down her work and went outside to get some fresh air. She was sitting on her porch steps when Tom rode up. He was dressed in his best clothes, clearly planning to attend the meeting. "Aren't you going to the revival?" he asked, dismounting from his horse. "No, I told Mrs. Chun I'm not the church type." Lucy wrapped her arms around herself. Even though the evening was warm, Tom studied her face in the dim light. "Mind if I ask why?" Lucy was quiet for a long moment. She wanted to tell him the truth, but she didn't know how to explain the complicated relationship between her past and her faith. "Let's just say that God and I haven't been on speaking terms for a while." "I understand that feeling," Tom said quietly. He sat down beside her on the steps. Sometimes it seems like God looks the other way when bad things happen to good people. Something in his voice told Lucy that he was speaking from personal experience. You sound like you've had your own struggles with faith. I have lost my wife to fever 3 years ago. We had been married only 2 years, and she was the kindest person you could ever meet. Didn't seem fair that someone like her should suffer, while men who do terrible things live long, healthy lives. Lucy felt her heart ache for him. I'm sorry. That must have been terrible. It was. For a long time, I was angry at everything. God, the world, myself for not being able to save her. Tom picked up a small stone and threw it into the darkness. But eventually I realized that staying angry was just making the pain worse. How did you get past it? I'm not sure I have completely. But I've learned that sometimes the best way to honor the people we've lost is to try to help others. My wife always saw the good in everyone. She would want me to keep looking for that good, even when it's hard to find. Lucy thought about this. In her old life, she had been taught that suffering was punishment for sin, that bad things happened to people who deserved them. But sitting here with Tom, listening to his gentle wisdom, she began to wonder if maybe she had been taught wrong. Do you think some people are beyond forgiveness? She asked quietly. Tom looked at her carefully. I think everyone deserves a chance to start over and do better. The question is whether they're willing to take that chance. Before Lucy could respond, they heard footsteps approaching. Billy Morrison came walking up the path, stumbling slightly, and smelling like whiskey. He had obviously been drinking instead of attending the revival meeting. Well, Billy said loudly, look what we have here. The mysterious lady and the cowboy having a romantic evening under the stars. Tom stood up immediately. You're drunk, Billy. Go home. I'm not that drunk, Billy said with a mean smile. Just drunk enough to say what everyone's thinking. What's a fancy city lady like her really doing in a place like this? And why won't she go to church with decent people? Lucy felt her body go cold. My reasons are my own business. I bet they are, Billy said, stepping closer. I bet you've got all kinds of interesting secrets. Maybe I should start asking around, see what I can find out about your past. The threat was clear, and Lucy felt panic rising in her chest. She had been so careful, so quiet, but if someone started digging into her background, they might discover things that would put her in danger. Tom moved between Billy and Lucy. That's enough. Get out of here before I make you leave. Billy laughed, but there was something ugly in it. You can't protect her forever, Reeves. This is a small town. People talk. Secrets have a way of coming out. After Billy left, Lucy sat back down heavily on the steps. Her whole body was shaking now, and she felt like she might be sick. Hey, Tom said gently, sitting beside her again. Don't let him scare you. Billy's all talk when he's drinking. What if he's not? Lucy whispered. What if he really does start asking questions? Tom was quiet for a moment. Do you want to tell me what you're so afraid of? Lucy looked at his kind face and felt a desperate urge to tell him everything. She wanted to explain about her marriage, about the violence, about the terrible night when everything changed. She wanted to share the burden of carrying such heavy secrets, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, she just shook her head. I can't, not yet. That's okay, Tom said. When you're ready to talk, I'll be here to listen. Until then, just know that whatever happened before, it doesn't change who you are now. Lucy felt tears starting to form in her eyes. How can you be so sure about that? Because I've watched you for weeks now. I've seen how you treat people, how hard you work, how you help others without expecting anything in return. That's who you really are, Lucy, not whatever mistakes you think you've made in the past. As Tom rode away that night, Lucy sat alone on her porch and cried for the first time since arriving in Copper Creek. She cried for the person she used to be, for the innocence she had lost, and for the fear that still followed her everywhere. She went, but she also cried with something that might have been hope. Tom's words had touched something deep inside her heart. Maybe it was possible that her past didn't have to define her future. Maybe in this small town, with these good people, She could find a way to forgive herself and start truly living again. The sound of hymns still drifted on the night air from the church, but for the first time in years they didn't fill Lucy with dread. Instead, they sounded like a promise that redemption might be possible, even for someone like her. The autumn air had turned crisp, and the leaves on the big oak tree near Lucy's shop were changing from green to gold. It had been 2 months since the revival meetings, and life had continued peacefully in Copper Creek. Billy Morrison had kept his distance after Tom's warning. Though Lucy sometimes caught him watching her with calculating eyes, Lucy's business had grown so successful that she was thinking about hiring help. The townspeople trusted her completely now, bringing her their most precious items to mend wedding dresses, christening gowns, and family heirlooms that needed careful repair. She had even started teaching Mrs. Chun's teenage daughter how to do fancy embroidery work. Tom's evening visits had become the best part of Lucy's day. They had developed an easy friendship built on shared conversations and comfortable silences. He helped her move heavy bolts of fabric, fixed whatever needed fixing around the old schoolhouse, and brought her news from the outside world. But always there was an unspoken understanding that certain topics remained off limits on this particular evening. Tom had brought fresh bread from the baker, and they were sharing it with butter and honey on Lucy's front porch. The sunset painted the sky in shades of orange and pink, and the town below looked peaceful and sleepy. "Mrs. Peterson wants me to make a dress for her daughter's wedding," Lucy said, breaking off a piece of bread. "She's willing to pay more than I usually charge because she wants it to be extra special." "That's wonderful," Tom said. "You've really built something good here." Lucy smiled, but there was sadness in her eyes. "Sometimes I can hardly believe this is my life now. It feels too good to be real. Why shouldn't good things be real for you?" Tom asked gently. Lucy was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the darkening sky. She had been carrying her secrets for so long that they felt like physical weight on her shoulders. Tonight, something about the peaceful evening and Tom's steady presence made her feel like she might finally be ready to share the burden. "Can I tell you something?" she asked quietly. "Something about why I really came here?" Tom set down his bread and gave her his full attention. "Of course." Lucy took a deep breath and tried to find the right words. "My name isn't really Lucy. That's the first lie I need to tell you about." Tom didn't look surprised. "What is your real name?" Elizabeth Harper, but I can never use that name again." Lucy's hands were starting to shake, so she clasped them together in her lap. "I was married back in Chicago to a man named Charles Whitmore." The name came out like poison, and Lucy had to pause to steady herself before continuing. "At first, Charles seemed perfect. He was handsome and wealthy, and he said all the right things. My parents thought I was the luckiest girl in the world." Lucy laughed bitterly. They had no idea what he was really like. Tom waited patiently for her to continue, his face calm and encouraging. "The first time he hit me was 3 weeks after our wedding," Lucy said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I had disagreed with him about something small, what dress to wear to a dinner party. He slapped me so hard I fell down, then told me it was my fault for embarrassing him." Lucy felt the familiar sick feeling in her stomach as the memories came flooding back. It only got worse from there. He controlled everything, what I wore, where I went, who I could talk to. If I tried to resist or ask questions, he would hurt me. And he was very good at hurting me in ways that didn't show. Tom's jaw was tight with anger, but his voice remained gentle. "How long did this go on?" 3 years. 3 years of being afraid every single day, of walking on eggshells, of pretending to be happy when we were in public. Lucy wiped away a tear that had started to fall. But the worst part wasn't the hitting. It was the way he made me feel like I deserved it, like I was worthless and stupid and lucky that anyone would want me. "That's not true," Tom said firmly. "None of that was your fault." "I know that now, but it took me a long time to understand it then," Lucy continued with her story. "Charles had important friends in the city, politicians and businessmen. I started to realize that some of his money came from things that weren't exactly legal. He was involved in bribing officials and fixing contracts for city projects. Lucy paused to gather her courage for the hardest part of the story. One night, I overheard him talking to his business partners about getting rid of a man who was threatening to expose their corruption. They weren't just talking about paying him off or scaring him. They were planning to have him killed. Tom leaned forward slightly. What did you do? I should have gone to the police, but I was terrified. Charles had friends everywhere, including in the police department. I knew that if I tried to report him and failed, he would kill me too. Lucy's voice got stronger as she continued. So I started keeping records. I wrote down everything I overheard, saved letters and documents, and hid them where Charles would never think to look. You were gathering evidence. Yes, but I wasn't sure what to do with it. Then one night, Charles came home drunk and angrier than I had ever seen him. He had lost money on some deal, and he decided it was somehow my fault. Lucy closed her eyes, remembering, he beat me worse than ever before. I truly thought he was going to kill me that night. Lucy opened her eyes and looked directly at Tom. When he finally passed out from the whiskey, I knew I had to leave immediately. But as I was packing my few belongings, I heard him getting up. He was coming after me with a gun in his hand, screaming that I was trying to run away and embarrass him. Tom's hands had clenched into fists, but he didn't interrupt. I had taken his spare pistol from his desk drawer, thinking I might need protection on the road. When he came into the room pointing his gun at me, I didn't have time to think. I just reacted. Lucy's voice became very quiet. I shot him first. The words hung in the air between them. Lucy waited for Tom's reaction, expecting shock or disgust or fear. Instead, he asked simply, "Did you kill him?" "No, I shot him in the shoulder and he dropped his gun. While he was on the ground, cursing and bleeding, I took all the evidence I had gathered and left. I've been running ever since, changing my name and trying to stay ahead of the men he hired to find me." Lucy felt exhausted after telling her story, but also strangely relieved. "So now you know the truth. I'm not the innocent woman everyone thinks I am. I shot my own husband and stole documents that could destroy powerful men. I'm probably wanted for attempted murder and theft." Tom was quiet for a long moment, thinking about everything she had told him. Finally, he spoke. "You said you weren't innocent," he said slowly. "But from where I sit, it sounds like you were defending yourself against a man who was trying to kill you. And those documents you took, they were evidence of crimes he committed, weren't they?" Lucy nodded, confused by his calm reaction. "Then I don't see a criminal when I look at you, Elizabeth, or Lucy, if that's what you prefer now. I see a brave woman who survived something terrible and found the courage to fight back when she had to." Lucy felt fresh tears starting to fall, but this time they were tears of relief. "Aren't you afraid of me? Don't you think I'm dangerous?" Tom reached over and gently took her hand. "I think you're one of the strongest people I've ever met. It takes incredible courage to escape from that kind of situation and start over completely." "But I shot someone, Tom. I hurt another person. You protected yourself when someone was trying to hurt you. There's a big difference." Tom squeezed her hand gently. "Do you regret defending yourself?" Lucy thought about it honestly. "No, I regret that it came to that, but I don't regret saving my own life." "Then you shouldn't feel guilty about it. You did what you had to do to survive." They sat in comfortable silence as the stars came out overhead. Lucy felt like a huge weight had been lifted from her shoulders. For months, she had carried her secrets alone, afraid that the truth would drive away anyone who learned it. But Tom's acceptance and understanding felt like a miracle. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for listening and for not judging me." "Thank you for trusting me with your story," Tom replied. "I know how hard that must have been." As they said goodnight and Tom prepared to leave, Lucy felt hopeful for the first time in years. Maybe it really was possible to start over and find happiness, even after everything she had been through. Maybe there were people in the world who could see past her mistakes and love her anyway. But even as she felt this new hope growing in her heart, Lucy knew that her past could still catch up with her. Charles was still out there somewhere, still looking for her, and the evidence she carried could still put both of them in danger. For tonight, though, she allowed herself to feel grateful for Tom's kindness and the possibility that she might Finally have found someone who could accept all of her, the good parts and the broken parts too. The night after Lucy shared her story, she barely slept. She kept expecting to hear horses approaching, men coming to arrest her, or Tom riding away forever now that he knew the truth about her past. When morning came, she felt exhausted and nervous as she waited to see how everything would change. But when Tom arrived at his usual time that evening, he seemed exactly the same as always. He brought news about a new foal-born at the ranch and helped her repair a loose board on her porch steps. The only difference was a gentleness in his voice, as if he understood that she might need extra kindness while processing everything that had happened. After they finished the repair work, they sat on the porch with coffee and watched the sunset. Lucy kept waiting for Tom to ask more questions about her past, or to tell her that he had been thinking about her confession. Instead, he talked about ordinary things, the weather, plans for winter preparations at the ranch, and Mrs. Chen's latest attempt to matchmake between her daughter and the doctor's son. Finally, Lucy couldn't stand the suspense anymore. "Aren't you going to say anything about what I told you last night?" Tom looked at her with those calm, steady eyes. "What would you like me to say?" "I don't know, anything. You're acting like nothing happened." "Nothing did happen as far as I'm concerned. You trusted me with something important. I listened, and now we move forward." Tom set down his coffee cup. "Did you expect me to treat you differently?" "I expected you to be shocked or scared or disgusted." Lucy's voice was small. "I expected you to realize that I'm not the person you thought I was." Tom was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully. "Can I tell you something about my past? Something I've never told anyone in this town?" Lucy nodded, curious and grateful for the chance to focus on someone else's story. "Before I came to Copper Creek, I wasn't a peaceful ranch foreman. I was a gunfighter." Tom's voice was steady, but Lucy could hear the old pain underneath it. "I hired myself out to settle disputes for whoever paid me the most. I was fast with a gun and good at my job, which meant I killed people for money." Lucy felt her breath catch. This gentle man who fixed her fence and brought her bread had once been a professional killer. I told myself I was just making a living, that I only shot men who were trying to shoot me first. But the truth was, I enjoyed the reputation and the fear I saw in people's eyes. I liked being known as someone dangerous. Tom looked out toward the town lights. "Then one day I was hired to settle a dispute between two families over water rights. I was supposed to scare off the family that couldn't pay my fee." Tom paused, and Lucy could see that this memory still caused him pain. "When I rode up to their farm, I found out that the family was just a man, his wife, and their 3 young children. They were homesteaders trying to make an honest living, and the wealthy rancher who hired me wanted their water for his cattle." Tom's hands clenched into fists. "The man came out to face me, knowing he couldn't outdraw me, but determined to protect his family anyway. What happened? I looked at those children hiding behind their mother's skirts, and I realized what I had become. I was about to destroy a good family for the sake of a rich man's greed." Tom shook his head. "I couldn't do it. I turned around and rode away without firing a shot." "That sounds like you did the right thing." "Maybe, but the story doesn't end there. The rancher hired another gunfighter when I refused the job. A man named Jake Carson, who wasn't troubled by shooting fathers in front of their children." Tom's voice got very quiet. "Carson killed the homesteader the next week. The family lost their farm and had to move away with nothing." Lucy felt her heart ache for him. "That wasn't your fault. You tried to do the right thing. Did I? Or did I just make myself feel better while knowing that someone else would finish the job?" Tom looked at her directly. "The point is, I spent years using violence to solve problems. I have blood on my hands that will never wash off. But you changed. You stopped living that way." "I did. After what happened with the homesteader, I hung up my guns and came here looking for a different life. I met my wife Anna, and she helped me believe that I could be a better man than I had been." Tom smiled sadly. "She never once made me feel ashamed of my past. She said that what mattered wasn't what I had done before, but what I chose to do going forward." Lucy began to understand why Tom had been so accepting of her story. She sounds like an amazing woman. She was. And she taught me something important about forgiveness and second chances. Tom turned to face Lucy completely. When you told me about shooting your husband, you said you weren't innocent anymore. You seem to think that would change how I see you. Lucy nodded, remembering the fear she had felt while telling him the truth. But here's the thing, Tom said gently. I never needed you to be innocent. I never wanted you to be some perfect woman without any scars or difficult choices in her past. The words hit Lucy like a physical blow, but in the best possible way. She felt tears starting to form in her eyes. What I see when I look at you is someone who survived something terrible and came out stronger on the other side. Someone who refused to let cruelty break her spirit. Someone who had the courage to fight back when she had to, and then the wisdom to use that second chance to build something good. Tom reached over and took her hand. The woman I've come to care about isn't some innocent girl who's never faced hardship. She's a fighter who knows the value of kindness because she's seen the damage that cruelty can do. She's someone who understands that life is complicated and that sometimes good people have to make difficult choices. Lucy was crying now, but they were tears of relief and gratitude. I was so afraid that if you knew the truth, you would see me as damaged or dangerous. I do see that you've been damaged. We all have in different ways. But damage doesn't make someone worthless. It just means they've lived through something difficult and survived it. Tom squeezed her hand gently. As for dangerous, well, I suppose you could be if someone threatened the people you care about. But that's not a bad thing. The world can be a dangerous place, and it's good to know that the people you love can protect themselves and others when necessary. Lucy looked at this man who had once been a gunfighter and was now the gentlest person she knew. How did you become so wise about forgiveness? I had a good teacher. Anna used to say that everyone deserves the chance to write a new chapter in their story, no matter how dark the previous chapters might have been. Tom smiled. She also said that the people worth loving are usually the ones who have faced their own darkness and chosen to walk toward the light anyway. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, holding hands and watching the stars come out. Lucy felt a peace she hadn't experienced in years. For the first time since her marriage began, she felt truly seen and accepted by another person. So what happens now? She asked quietly. Now we keep building the life you started here. We take each day as it comes, and we face whatever challenges might arise together. Tom brought her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. And we remember that the past doesn't define us, our choices going forward do. As Tom prepared to leave that night, Lucy felt like a completely different person than she had been just 24 hours earlier. The weight of shame and secrecy that she had carried for so long was finally gone, replaced by something she had almost forgotten was possible, hope for a real future with someone who loved all of her, including the broken parts. Tom? She called as he mounted his horse. Yes? Thank you for never needing me to be innocent. Thank you for seeing strength where I only saw damage. Tom smiled down at her from the saddle. Thank you for being brave enough to trust me with your story. And Lucy, that strength you think I see in you, it was there all along. You just needed someone to help you remember it. As he rode away into the darkness, Lucy stood on her porch and looked up at the star-filled sky. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, and her past might still catch up with her eventually. But for the first time in years, she wasn't facing the future alone. She had found someone who could love her exactly as she was, a survivor, a fighter, and a woman strong enough to create beauty and kindness even after experiencing the worst that life could offer. The scared girl who had fled Chicago was gone forever. In her place stood a woman ready to claim the happiness she had fought so hard to find. Winter had settled over Copper Creek, bringing shorter days and crisp mornings that made the town look like something from a Christmas card. Lucy's shop stayed busy as people prepared warm clothes for the cold months ahead. She had hired Mrs. Chun's daughter, Rose, as an assistant, and the two of them worked together contentedly, filling orders and chatting about town gossip. Lucy's relationship with Tom had grown deeper and stronger since the night of her confession. They spent most Evenings together now, sometimes at her place, and sometimes at his small house near the ranch. Tom had even started keeping some of his clothes at the schoolhouse, and Lucy had begun thinking about what it might be like to truly share a life with someone. The people of Copper Creek had begun treating them as a couple, including them both in invitations and assuming they would attend events together. Mrs. Chun had started making pointed comments about weddings and spring being a lovely time for new beginnings. Lucy found that the idea of marrying Tom didn't frighten her the way she had expected it to. This felt completely different from her first marriage, built on honesty, respect, and genuine care for each other. On this particular morning, Lucy was working on a quilt for the doctor's new baby when she heard the sound of a horse approaching at a fast pace. She looked out the window and saw a stranger dismounting in front of the general store. He was well dressed in city clothes and had the look of someone who wasn't from around these parts. Lucy felt a familiar cold sensation in her stomach. Strangers asking questions were always a source of worry for her. Even though months had passed without any sign of trouble from her past, she watched as the man went into the store and came out a few minutes later with Mrs. Chun. They talked for several minutes, with the stranger gesturing toward different buildings around town. Lucy couldn't hear what they were saying, but something about the man's manner made her nervous. Rose noticed her distraction. "Do you know who that is?" she asked, following Lucy's gaze. "No, but he doesn't look like he's just passing through." Lucy tried to keep her voice casual. "Maybe he's a traveling salesman or someone looking to buy property." But even as she said it, Lucy knew that wasn't right. The man had the alert, observant look of someone who was searching for something specific. An hour later, Mrs. Chen came to Lucy's shop with a worried expression on her face. "That stranger was asking about you," she said without any greeting. Lucy's hands went still on her sewing. "What kind of questions?" "He said he was looking for a woman who might have come to town in the past year. He described someone who looked quite a bit like you, dark hair, about your height, probably traveling alone." Mrs. Chun sat down heavily in the chair beside Lucy's work table. "He said he was a detective hired by the woman's family to find her." Lucy forced herself to keep breathing normally. "What did you tell him?" "I told him that we had several new people come to town this year, but no one matching that exact description." Mrs. Chun looked at Lucy carefully. "I didn't mention you specifically, but dear, if he keeps asking around, someone is going to point him in your direction." Lucy nodded, trying to think clearly despite the panic rising in her chest. After months of safety and happiness, her worst fear was coming true. Charles had found her. Did he say anything else about this woman's family? Why they were looking for her? He said she had left home suddenly after a family tragedy and that her relatives were very worried about her. He seemed very professional and polite. Mrs. Chun paused. But something about him made me uncomfortable. Maybe it was the way his eyes stayed cold even when he was smiling. Lucy knew exactly what Mrs. Chun meant. She had seen that same cold calculation in the eyes of the men who worked for Charles, men who could be charming and professional while planning terrible things. After Mrs. Chun left, Lucy sent Rose home early and locked the door of her shop. She needed time to think and plan. The detective would eventually find someone who would tell him about the woman living in the old schoolhouse. It was only a matter of time. Lucy went to her bedroom and pulled out the small bag she had kept packed and hidden under her bed, a habit she had maintained even during the happiest months in Copper Creek. Inside were her few precious belongings, some money she had saved, and the documents that contained evidence of Charles's crimes. She was checking the contents of the bag when she heard Tom's voice calling her name from outside. Lucy quickly hid the bag and went to open the door. Tom took one look at her face and stepped inside immediately. "What's wrong?" Lucy told him about the detective and Mrs. Chun's warning. As she spoke, she watched Tom's expression grow serious and determined. "So you think your husband sent this man to find you?" "I'm sure of it. The description was too close to be a coincidence, and the story about worried family members is exactly the kind of lie Charles would tell." Lucy began pacing around the room. "I have to leave Tom tonight before he finds me." "Wait," Tom said firmly. "Let's think about this carefully." Running again means giving up everything you've built here. Is that really what you want? It doesn't matter what I want. If Charles finds me, he'll either drag me back to Chicago or have me killed quietly. Either way, I'll disappear. Lucy felt tears starting to form. I can't put you or anyone else in this town in danger. Tom caught her hands and made her stop. Pacing, what if there was another choice? What if instead of running, we figured out a way to end this permanently? How? Charles has money, connections, and men who will do anything he asks. I'm just one person with a bag full of old papers. But those papers contain evidence of his crimes, right? Evidence that could put him in prison? Tom's voice was getting excited. What if we found a way to get that evidence to someone who could? Use it? Lucy had thought about this possibility many times over the past months, but it had always seemed too dangerous. Who would believe me? And even if they did, Charles has friends in law enforcement. He could make the evidence disappear or claim it was forged. Maybe in Chicago, but what about federal authorities? Or newspapers in other cities? Tom was thinking out loud now. There has to be someone who would be interested in bringing down a corrupt politician. Lucy wanted to hope, but fear was stronger. It's too risky. If we tried something like that and failed, Charles would make sure I suffered before he killed me. And if you keep running, how long before he catches up with you anyway? This detective found you here. What makes you think the next town will be safer? Tom's words hit home because Lucy had been thinking the same thing. She was tired of running, tired of looking over her shoulder, tired of being afraid to build relationships because she might have to abandon them at any moment. Even if we could find someone to take the evidence seriously, it would take time. That detective is here now, asking questions. He could find me at any moment. Then we need to slow him down while we figure out our next move. Tom was quiet for a moment, thinking. What if he had an accident? Nothing serious, just something that would keep him busy for a few days? Lucy stared at him. Tom, you can't hurt someone just to help me. That would make you a criminal too. I'm not talking about hurting anyone. I'm talking about creating a distraction. Maybe his horse goes lame, or he gets sick from bad food, or someone convinces him that the woman he's looking for was seen in the next town over. Despite her fear, Lucy found herself considering the possibility. You would do that. For me, I would do a lot more than that for you. This is your home now, Lucy. These are your people. We don't let strangers come in and threaten our family. The word family made Lucy's heart ache with longing. She had been alone for so long that she had almost forgotten what it felt like to have people who would fight for her. What if it doesn't work? What if we just make things worse? Tom pulled her into his arms and held her tight. Then at least we'll have tried. At least we'll know that we fought for the life we want instead of just giving up and running away. Lucy leaned against his chest and felt some of her panic start to calm down. Tom was right. She was tired of running. She had found something precious in Copper Creek, something worth fighting for. Okay, she said quietly, let's try. But if this goes wrong, if people get hurt because of me, I'll never forgive myself. Nothing's going to happen to anyone, Tom said with confidence. She didn't feel. We're going to figure this out together, and then you're never going to have to run again. As they began planning how to deal with the detective, Lucy allowed herself to hope that maybe, just maybe, her running days were finally over. Maybe it was time to stop being a victim of her past and start fighting for her future. But even as she made these plans with Tom, Lucy kept her packed bag close by. Old habits die hard, and part of her would always be ready to disappear into the night if everything fell apart. She had learned the hard way that hope could be dangerous. But she was finally ready to take that risk for the chance at real happiness. The next morning brought unexpected developments that changed everything. Lucy was drinking coffee and trying to calm her nerves when Tom arrived at sunrise, his face grim but determined. The detective is gone, he announced without any greeting. Lucy nearly dropped her coffee cup. Gone? What do you mean gone? He rode out of town before dawn. But Lucy, he didn't leave alone. Tom sat down across from her at the small table. He met up with 3 other men about a mile outside of town. Mrs. Chin's son was coming back from checking on his cattle and saw them from a distance. Lucy felt her blood turn cold. 3 more men? Armed men? By the look of them? They weren't dressed like detectives or lawmen. Tom's voice was steady, but Lucy could see the worry in his eyes. I think your husband is done being subtle about finding you. Lucy stood up and began pacing again, a habit she had developed whenever stress overwhelmed her. He's coming himself, isn't he? Charles is coming to get me. It looks that way. The question is, what do we do about it? Before Lucy could answer, they heard the sound of multiple horses approaching fast. Lucy ran to the window and felt her heart stop. 4 men on horseback were riding toward the schoolhouse, and she recognized the one in the lead immediately, Charles. Whitmore looked exactly the same as he had the night she shot him. Handsome, well-dressed, and radiating the kind of cold confidence that came from never having to face real consequences for his actions. Even from a distance, Lucy could see the cruel smile on his face as he spotted her in the window. It's him, she whispered, backing away from the window. Tom, you have to go. You have to get away from here before he sees you with me. I'm not leaving you to face this alone. You don't understand. Charles doesn't just hurt people who cross him, he destroys them completely. He'll find out who you are, where you work, everyone you care about. He'll ruin your life just for helping me. Tom walked to Lucy's bedroom and came back carrying the small pistol she kept hidden in her dresser drawer. He checked to make sure it was loaded, then handed it to her. Do you remember how to use this? Lucy took the gun with hands that were steadier than she expected. Yes. Good, because we're going to finish this today one way or another. Before Lucy could protest further, Charles's voice rang out from outside. Elizabeth! I know you're in there, darling. Come out and let's have a civilized conversation about your little adventure. The sound of his voice using her real name made Lucy feel sick, but it also sparked something else, anger. She had spent months being afraid of this moment, but now that it was here, she found herself remembering all the reasons she had been willing to risk everything to escape from him. You don't have to answer him, Tom said quietly. Yes, I do. This has to end today. Lucy tucked the pistol into the waistband of her skirt and walked toward the door. But I'm not the same person who ran away from Chicago. He's going to find that out. Lucy opened the door and stepped onto the porch. Charles sat on his horse, looking relaxed and confident, as if he was paying a social call instead of hunting down a woman who had fled from his violence. The 3 men with him looked like exactly what they were, hired killers who would follow orders without asking questions. Hello, Elizabeth. You're looking well. Country life seems to agree with you. Charles's voice was pleasant, but Lucy could hear the threat underneath it. My name is Lucy now, she said, keeping her voice steady. Elizabeth died the night you tried to kill her. Charles laughed, the same cold sound she remembered from their marriage. Always so dramatic. I never tried to kill you, darling. I was simply trying to prevent you from making a terrible mistake. The mistake was marrying you in the first place, perhaps. But that's a mistake we can correct. Charles gestured too. His men, I've brought some friends to help escort you home. We can discuss your future properly once we're back in Chicago. I'm not going anywhere with you. Charles's pleasant expression slipped for just a moment, revealing the cruelty underneath. Oh, but you are. You see, you took something that belongs to me when you left. I want it back. Lucy knew he was talking about the documents that could expose his criminal activities. I don't know what you mean. Don't insult my intelligence. Elizabeth, you always were too smart for your own good. Those papers you stole are going to cause problems for me unless I get them back. Maybe that's exactly what they should do. Charles's face darkened with real anger now. You have no idea what you're meddling with. The people I work with don't tolerate loose ends, and that's exactly what you've become. Tom chose that moment to step out onto the porch beside Lucy, Charles's eyes immediately focused on him with the intensity of a predator spotting new prey. And who might this be? Your new protector? Charles looked Tom up and down dismissively. Sir, I suggest you step aside. This is a private family matter. The lady says she doesn't want to go with you, Tom replied calmly. That makes it my business. Does it indeed? Charles smiled that cold smile again. Boys, it seems we have a local hero who thinks he can interfere with my business. The three hired men started to dismount, their hands moving toward their weapons. But before they could draw their guns, something unexpected happened. Sheriff Martinez appeared from behind the schoolhouse with his deputy, both carrying rifles. At the same time, Mrs. Chin's husband emerged from behind the general store across the road, also armed. Then the doctor stepped out of his office. Followed by the blacksmith and several ranch hands from Tom's workplace, Charles looked around in surprise as more and more townspeople appeared, all carrying weapons and all looking determined to protect. Lucy, even Mrs. Chun, stood on her store porch with an old shotgun in her hands. "What is this?" Charles demanded. Tom smiled grimly. "This is what happens when you threaten family in a small town. People look out for each other here." Lucy felt tears starting in her eyes, but they were tears of gratitude rather than fear. While she had been terrified of facing Charles alone, the people of Copper Creek had quietly organized to stand with her. Sheriff Martinez stepped forward. "Gentlemen, I'm going to have to ask you to state your business in my town." Charles tried to regain his composure. "I'm here to collect my wife who ran away from home. This is a private matter." "The lady doesn't seem to want to go with you," the sheriff observed. "And in my town, when a woman says no, that's the end of the discussion?" "You don't understand who you're dealing with," Charles said, his voice getting dangerous. "I have important connections. I can make life very difficult for everyone in this little town." "And you don't understand who you're dealing with," Tom replied. "This lady is under the protection of Copper Creek now. Anyone who threatens her threatens all of us." Charles looked around at the determined faces surrounding him and realized that his usual tactics of intimidation weren't going to work here. These weren't city people who could be impressed by wealth and connections. They were frontier folks who had faced down cattle rustlers, harsh weather, and every other kind of trouble that came their way. "This isn't over, Elizabeth," Charles said, his mask of civility finally dropping completely. "You can't hide behind these people forever." "I'm not hiding," Lucy said, finding her voice stronger than she had ever heard it. "I'm home. And these aren't just people protecting me, they're my family, something you never understood." Lucy reached into her skirt and pulled out the pistol Tom had given her, holding it steady and aimed at Charles. "You have two choices. You can ride out of here right now and never come back, or you can try to take me and see how that works out for you." For the first time since she had known him, Lucy saw something like uncertainty in Charles's eyes. He was used to controlling people through fear and isolation, but he had never faced someone who had found the courage to fight back with a whole community behind them. "You won't shoot me in front of all these witnesses?" Charles said, but his voice lacked conviction. "I shot you once before to save my life," Lucy replied calmly. "I'll do it again to protect my family." The standoff lasted for several more tense moments. Charles looked around at the armed townspeople, calculating his odds and clearly not liking what he saw. Finally, with obvious reluctance, he gestured to his men to mount up. "This isn't finished," he said as he turned his horse. "Yes, it is," Tom said firmly. "If you or anyone working for you comes near this town again, you won't ride out. That's a promise." As Charles and his men rode away, the townspeople slowly lowered their weapons but remained alert until the riders disappeared over the hill. Only then did Lucy allow herself to breathe normally again. Mrs. Chun was the first to reach her, wrapping Lucy in a warm embrace. "Are you all right, dear?" Lucy looked around at all the faces, friends, who had risked their own safety to protect her from a dangerous man they didn't even know. "I'm better than all right. I'm home." But even as she celebrated this victory, Lucy knew that Tom was wrong about one thing. This wasn't completely finished yet. Charles would regroup and try again, probably with more men and a better plan. The evidence she carried was too important to his survival for him to simply give up. The real battle was still to come. But for the first time since leaving Chicago, Lucy felt ready to fight it. She wasn't alone anymore, and that made all the difference in the world. 3 months had passed since Charles's visit to Copper Creek, and life had settled into a Newtham that felt both peaceful and secure. The documents that Lucy had carried for so long were now safely in the hands of a federal prosecutor in Austin, along with her detailed testimony about Charles's criminal activities. The prosecutor had been very interested in the evidence of corruption involving several prominent Chicago politicians and businessmen. Word had reached Copper Creek through official channels that Charles Whitmore and 3 of his associates had been arrested on federal charges. The prosecutor expected the trials to result in significant prison sentences, which meant that Lucy's running days were truly over. She was free to live openly under her chosen name, free from the fear that had followed her for so long. The schoolhouse had been transformed yet again, this time into a proper home that Lucy shared with Tom. They had married in a simple ceremony by the creek on the first warm day of spring. With the entire town in attendance, Mrs. Chun had insisted on making the wedding dress, and Sheriff Martinez had given Lucy away since she had no family of her own present. Lucy's sewing business had grown so successful that she now employed 3 local women and was considering expanding into the empty building next to the general store. The people of Copper Creek had embraced her completely as one of their own, and several families had asked her to teach their daughters the fine needlework skills she had mastered. On this particular evening, Lucy was sitting on the porch of their expanded home, working on a baby quilt while Tom repaired a bridle for one of the ranch horses. The setting sun painted the sky in brilliant colors, and the sound of children playing in the town below drifted up on the warm air. "Mrs. Patterson wants to know if you can make a christening gown for her new grandson," Tom said, looking up from his work. "She says she pay extra if you can have it ready by next month. Of course, I love making baby clothes." Lucy smiled as she added another delicate stitch to the quilt. "Did you know that Mrs. Chun is already dropping hints about when we might need baby clothes of our own?" Tom grinned. "She mentioned something about that to me yesterday when I was buying supplies. She seems to think we're taking too long to provide her with new little ones to spoil." Lucy felt a familiar flutter of happiness at the thought of children. For so many years, the idea of bringing children into her world had seemed impossible and cruel. But now, surrounded by love and safety, she could imagine teaching a daughter to sew or watching Tom teach a son to ride horses. "What do you think about that?" she asked quietly. Tom set down his work and moved to sit beside her on the porch swing they had built together. "I think that when the time is right, we'll know. And when that time comes, our children will be the luckiest kids in Texas." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, enjoying the peaceful evening and the sense of contentment that came from building something good together. Lucy thought about how different her life was now compared to just a year ago, when she had stepped off the stagecoach as a frightened woman with nothing but secrets and a desperate hope for a fresh start. "Do you ever think about Chicago?" Tom asked, as if reading her thoughts. "Sometimes, but not with sadness anymore." Lucy considered her answer carefully. "I think about the woman I used to be and how scared she was. I feel sorry for her, but I'm also proud of her for finding the courage to leave. She was braver than she knew." "Maybe, but she was also alone, and that made everything harder." Lucy took Tom's hand. "The woman I am now isn't just braver. She's stronger because she has people who love her. That makes all the difference." Tom squeezed her hand gently. "Speaking of people who love you, I have something to tell you. I got a letter today from that prosecutor in Austin." Lucy felt a brief moment of anxiety, wondering if there were new legal complications from the case against Charles. "It's good news," Tom said quickly, seeing her expression. "Charles was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison. The judge said it would have been longer, but he cooperated with authorities to expose some of his partners in exchange for a lighter sentence." Lucy felt a weight she hadn't even realized she was still carrying finally lift from her shoulders. 15 years. He'll be an old man when he gets out. And by then, you'll be so well established here that he wouldn't dare bother you even if he wanted to. Tom pulled her closer. "You're completely free now, Lucy. No more looking over your shoulder. No more worrying about the past catching up with you." As if to emphasize his point, the sound of laughter rang out from the town below. A group of children were playing a game in the street while their parents chatted on nearby porches. It was the kind of ordinary, peaceful scene that Lucy had dreamed about during her darkest days. Mrs. Chun stopped by the shop today with some interesting news, Lucy said, changing the subject to something lighter. Billy Morrison is apparently courting a girl from the next county. Someone who isn't impressed by his father's money and expects him to behave like a gentleman, Tong laughed. Good for her. Maybe she's straightened him out. Mrs. Chun thinks they might actually be good for each other. Billy seems to be trying to become a better person to win her approval. People can change, given the right motivation, Tom observed. Look at us, a former gunfighter and